So that's a bit about leaky gut, inflammation, and disease. So that is the leaky gut story, which brings us into the lectin story. So let's chat about lectins. What the heck is a lectin, okay? So people freak out when they first get my foods list because they're used to foods being pegged as healthy, such as healthy whole grains or nightshades like zucchini and squash or chia seeds and all these superfoods that people talk about, right? And they're not on my list. So people come to me thinking I made some kind of mistake, right? Obviously, they always think I made some kind of mistake and they don't realize that I didn't. I didn't leave anything out of that list, okay? So most of the things that you would expect to be on there, like healthy foods, you're saying, well, Justin, there's all these healthy foods you don't have on there. If those foods you love were healthy, we would have never met each other. I need you to understand that. We wouldn't be talking on social media. You wouldn't be emailing me. You wouldn't be saying, I've tried everything and I've roller coaster dieted my whole life up and down and now I need your help, right? That wouldn't be happening if all these healthy little superfoods that people talk about actually worked. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be watching this video if that's the case, all right? Why do you think you reached out to me in the first place, right? So, let's get back to lectins. A lectin is a large protein molecule. So, I just kind of come up with shapes, by the way. This isn't what they look like or whatever. I'm just trying to, like I use little squiggly lines for fatty acids and then use circles for triglycerides, which are stored fatty acids that are attached to a glycerol molecule. And then I'll do little triangles to let you know we're still talking about protein, but the good guys. So anyway, I know it's a little bit confusing. I'm just gonna use these shapes. I hope the visuals are helpful. I really do. So a lectin is a large protein molecule. A lectin is literally a weapon. It is a weaponized protein that is the defense mechanism of plants. Plants can't fight against us. Plants can't protect themselves from predators. They're stationary, right? So what they have is they have these little guys to help them fight back. What they're actually trying to do, they're using chemicals. A lectin is a chemical, and that's meant to make predators like us, when we ingest them, they're working towards the survival of their entire plant species. So the lectins are designed so that when we do eat them, it damages us and makes us so sick and so unhealthy that we never want to eat them again. They are trying to deter predators from eating them. The problem with us Americans is we're too stupid to get the hint. Really, I mean, it's crazy. We know that these things damage the gut. We're talking about all the food pyramid issues, and we keep going back because they taste good, right? The plants are winning. The plants use these things to kill us. They're literally slowly killing us, slow, painful deaths. If you've ever had an autoimmune issue, you know it's slow, you know it's painful, you know it gets worse over time. It's awful, okay? Now, of all lectins, the most well-known lectin, and you're gonna know it as soon as I say it, is gluten, right? So people talk about, I'm gluten-free, I'm cool, right? They talk about gluten-free and all these gluten-free products and all these things. It's because gluten is the most well-known lectin. People don't understand that the other lectins out there are every bit as damaging. This one just gets the most attention. By the way, not that many people are actually celiac. It's a very, 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 very small percentage of the population. I believe all humans have some sort of intolerance or sensitivity to gluten, but it's not celiac, it's not a full-blown allergy or sensitivity, okay? So, that said, that is the most popular lectin, but there are a lot of other lectins, and we're going to talk about them, okay? So lectins are designed to disrupt cellular communication. So your cells talk to each other. They disrupt cellular communication, and they open up those tight junctions, which I drew earlier, in between the cells, the lining of the gut. They want to open those tight junctions and cause leaky gut, which causes an autoimmune response, which causes inflammation in your body, which causes disease. This is how plants kill you. This is literally how lectins kill you. Now, these toxic proteins, they mimic healthy proteins. So like I talked about, you might have, a protein here. Let's just call that P, a little p. Let's say that's like an amino acid from grass-fed beef or something like that, right? It's like a healthy protein, and then you have these lectin proteins, okay? So they're designed, they're like disguised little assassins. It's insane. They want to infiltrate, like a Trojan horse, they want to infiltrate the enemy, us, dressed like one of the good guys, and then they want to wreak havoc on us. So what happens is, when these proteins come into the bloodstream, the body is a supercomputer. I've talked about this a lot. I'm all into artificial intelligence, all that stuff. And I really think the body is a supercomputer. What it does is it scans these proteins as they come in like barcodes. So if it sees a foreign invader, it's going to scan that barcode and go, oh no, we need to kill all these protein molecules. The issue is they look just like your healthy protein molecules. They're just a little bit smaller or larger. right? So what happens is the barcode message gets screwed up, and all of a sudden all proteins look like bad proteins, and the body starts attacking itself. It wants to attack the bad proteins, but it's now attacking the good and the bad proteins. It's a very violent reaction. It's toxic. It's inflammatory. This is the definition of an autoimmune response, and it's what lectins cause. It's what leaky gut causes. Leaky gut, lectins get in the system, autoimmune response, you have systemic inflammation. It's literally the body attacking itself. So not only do these lectins cause leaky gut, but they cause the damaging of communication between cells. And that's a big deal because they do that with cells, and they also do it between nerves. So these lectins can bind to one nerve and stop it from communicating with another nerve. So now your nerve endings literally can't talk to each other. So I want you to think about that, like literally nerves, neurons, all that. If they can't talk to each other, hello brain fog. If you've ever had brain fog or trouble concentrating or had a big bowl of pasta and then felt really, really tired and couldn't focus on your work, you have lectins to thank for that, okay? You have lectins to thank for brain fog. Now, lectins also bind to viruses and bacteria and assist them in binding to their intended targets. So if you're someone who gets sick all the time, you think you have a very weak immune system, I always get sick, my friends never get sick, my family never gets sick, you're probably very highly sensitive to lectins. And those lectins are helping you get sick, okay? And it gets worse. There's a lot more to the story. They do a whole lot of other things. But I want to talk to you about some of these lectins because you may have one food that has one lectin or two lectins, right? So maybe one or two lectins in some foods. There is one food that contains all known forms of lectins. All known forms of damaging lectins are contained in wheat. What? Whole grains, healthy whole grains. That's right, healthy whole grains contain every single version of a lectin that can damage your body. Now, whole grains that we've been told for 4 decades are healthy. Thank you, American Heart Association. Think about that shit the next time you buy a healthy whole grain box of Cheerios, multigrain Cheerios with the American Heart Association stamp of approval on it. Think about that. They're literally telling you to shovel lectins in your mouth, and they're the American Heart Association. Government's out for your best interest, right? Conspiracy theory. Oh no, getting crazy, right? So let me give you a great example of a really, really bad lectin because we're talking about whole grains. There's one called wheat germ agglutinin, and that is, I'm gonna give you the short version of that, just not say wheat germ agglutinin every single time. We're gonna talk about WGA. So wheat germ agglutinin, WGA, is found, like we said, in healthy whole grains, right? Now, this is particularly good at making human beings store fat. So another thing that these little lectin bastards do is they mimic or block hormones. It's crazy. They can trick your body into thinking that they are hormones, which obviously wreaks havoc. And the reason why whole grains got so popular is because WGA, wheat germ agglutinin, is so effective at storing body fat that our ancestors used it to purposefully gain body fat so they wouldn't starve in the winter months. Literally. That's where the explosion of popularity in whole grains came from. People purposefully gaining body fat so they wouldn't die in the colder months. That is thanks to wheat germ agglutinin. Right? It's ridiculous. So earlier, I talked about those little tight junctions, and the first goal of lectins is to get in and wiggle apart those tight junctions so they can get into the bloodstream. So I want to talk to you about when they do this mimicking hormone thing and this WGA thing. So I did it in back to basics fat loss. All right, let's say we have a fat cell. So we'll call this a fat cell. So what I talked about with you guys was lipoprotein lipase, and we talked about how insulin gives fat cells the signal to store glucose as triglycerides, right? So that activates something called LPL, lipoprotein lipase, which tells that cell to suck in excess glucose. So now we're going to talk about these docks. So there are receptors that work like these docking ports. It's really great. It's like something out of Star Wars is what's happening in your body all the time. So this is not what it looks like, but I'm going to try to come up with a visual. So let's say we have a dock, right? So this is a dock. Now we have a protein, right? So this protein is trying, so let's say, actually in this case it would be insulin. So insulin is trying to dock to this fat cell, okay? So we're putting F here. This is a fat cell. So insulin is trying to come into this dock. Now, once it's firmly in place in that dock, insulin starts activating things like lipoprotein lipase, LPL, which we talked about. It's basically saying, hey, we have a bunch of insulin. Insulin is here, backing up to the port, docks at the port, and says, yeah, guys, there's a whole bunch of excess glucose in the bloodstream, so I'm gonna need you guys to soak that up and store it as triglycerides, right? Store it as fat. So it starts giving a signal, insulin is giving the signal to that cell to suck up that excess glucose and store it as body fat. That's what's happening when these hormones and these proteins and everything dock and do what they're supposed to do. This is cellular signaling, okay? I told you that lectins disrupt cellular signaling. Now what happens is, this lectin looks a lot like this protein. So you have WGA right here, right? WGA comes in, we'll put a W, mimics insulin, docks in that port, and then tells that fat cell forever to keep storing glucose. Yep, there's plenty of excess glucose in the bloodstream. It gives a false signal and says, suck in all the glucose, suck in all the glucose, suck in all the glucose. This is so damaging, this WGA thing is so damaging, that even when there's no excess glucose in the bloodstream, the fat cell will get a signal to keep storing fat. Keep storing fat, keep storing fat. Now, when there's no excess glucose in the bloodstream, what happens? If you guys are seasoned veteran Clovis listeners, then you know that the body can create its own glucose. How does it do that? It strips amino acids. It strips things like protein. It attacks its own body, an autoimmune response, starts breaking down your lean muscle tissue and breaking down your organs to create glucose. This starves your muscle cells, starves your brain. Things like brain fog, again, start happening, and it just helps you store excess body fat like it's nobody's business. You're just sucking in all this fat because the body never gets a signal to turn off glucose absorption. That signal never gets turned off because this little lectin bastard that was in that bread that you just couldn't resist, it was so delicious, is now screwing all your fat cells up because you got all these little lectins floating around. That's how dangerous these plant compounds are. That's how dangerous these plant chemicals are. I pretty much have to read this to you just because we're going to talk about the foods that are highest in lectins, right? So we talked about the food pyramid. You're dealing with high lectin foods, mostly refined, starchy foods, okay? So anything that is created from a whole grain, right? So you have sugar, bread, pasta, potatoes, flours, any flours made from grains, artificial sweeteners, peanuts, and all legumes. By the way, 94% of human beings are born with an antibody to peanuts. That's how terrible peanuts are. 94% of humans just can't eat them, right? Cashews, sunflower seeds, chia seeds. We have nightshade vegetables. You probably heard people talk about nightshade vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, squash, zucchini, eggplant, pumpkin, right? All fruits, literally loaded with them, except for some unripe fruits. That's why people ask me why I allow green bananas and I don't allow regular bananas. Green bananas have more resistant starch, way less lectins. As they ripen, the lectin content goes up, the resistant starch content goes down, the sugar content goes up, okay? So all fruits, literally, except for in-season organic berries, and we've talked about that before, and I took them off the food list because people were going out and eating berries all the time. They weren't listening to the organic in-season part. It drove me nuts, so I took them off the list, okay? Whole grains, all the healthy vegetarian stuff, oats, quinoa, rice, barley, corn, wheatgrass. Those wheatgrass shots, don't do that shit. Don't take raw wheatgrass. It's ridiculous. You would never go outside and eat wheatgrass, right? So don't take a shot of it. Ridiculous. Hydrogenated vegetable oils, soy, all A1 dairy products. Go back and watch Crash Course on Dairy, where I talk about A1 versus A2 dairy. Almost all the dairy we have here in America is feedlot A1 dairy. You gotta avoid all of those. And this list literally goes on and on and on. So since I mentioned dairy last, I want to talk about how it seems like this is only taking place in plant compounds, right? These are plant foods. Not the case. It used to be just in plant compounds until us Americans and humans came along with all of our clever ideas. So I've told you before that the only animals on Earth that become overweight are one, humans, two, all the animals that humans feed. That's it. Dogs and cats don't get obese in the wild. They only do it when humans interfere, okay? So the reason why they're not just in plants anymore is thanks to America's food production practices, okay? So what happens here? Let's say you have a cow. A cow would never eat corn or soy. If you gave it the choice, it would never eat corn or soy. Now here's what's crazy, is corn and soy are loaded with lectins, and they're so bad for even the cow's digestive system that they get tremendous acid reflux. These feedlot animals get such bad acid reflux, they refuse to eat. They stop eating because the acid reflux is so bad. So, what do us very smart humans do? We pump something, literally pump something into the stomachs of these animals called calcium carbonate. If any of you have ever taken Tums, an antacid, you have taken calcium carbonate. That is the active ingredient in Tums. And I want to tell you a fun fact. Calcium carbonate, the active ingredient in Tums, half of the entire world's production of calcium carbonate goes to feedlot animals. Half of all the calcium carbonate that is produced in the entire world is given to animals because we're feeding them lectin-filled corn and soy and destroying their digestive system, and they will refuse to eat unless we reduce the very uncomfortable acid reflux that they're experiencing from these awful foods they're not designed to eat. How nuts is that? We're literally funnel pumping like a pressure washer Tums into the stomach of cows because they're so sick because of the shit we're feeding them. It's insane. Grass-fed debate? Do we want to have the grass-fed debate again? Pasture-raised animals? Do we want to talk about that? And that's the crazy thing, is the same goes for all livestock. This is chickens, ducks, goats, whatever. I can't tell you how many people have chickens and feed them corn. Just feed their chickens a bunch of corn. Huh? What? It's crazy, right? So congratulations, human beings have figured out how to not only have plants have lectins, but now we figured out how to let animals have lectins. So those proteins, because they are proteins, as you know, now end up in the food supply, in animal products, in dairy, in meats, grass-fed meats, stored in the body fat, all these things. It's really terrible. This is super fun stuff, right guys? Awesome. All right, so now this is all the doom and gloom, scary stuff. Let's get into what can you do.